Hello and welcome back to Blow Up the Team. Jim here today with Matt.
What's up?
Today we are going to be going through and talking about the Tennessee Titans.
Tennessee, Derrick Henry, Wrecking Crew.
Oh, well,
Just should
interesting.
change the name to the Derrick Henrys, honestly.
Just change the name to the Derrick Henrys. Interesting.
Actually, I guess Tannehill was pretty impressive too, but that's beside the point.
Anyways, we're going to be talking about the Tennessee Titans and the 2020 NFL draft that they had. Before we get into the video, like usual, we do not own the clips that I will be showing, so the link to that video will be linked in the description down below. Um, Also, another kind of housekeeping item, the ranking at the end of the video will only be based purely on their draft that they had. It has nothing to do with anything else that they did in the offseason, nor is it indicative of how I think the team will perform. I may briefly mention it, but it does not influence my draft grade. It is just kind of a recap for everyone as well as myself, and then kind of um, set the tone for where I think they should be looking in the draft and kind of give you a background into my head. But without further ado, let's talk about the Tennessee Titans. They were only 9-7 in the regular season, but they really surprised in the playoffs, and this team showed some real promise. The transition to Ryan Tannehill from Marcus Mariota in Week 6 gave them depth I don't think that they were necessarily expecting to have in the beginning of the season. Now, it is notable that Mariota will not be returning this season, so kind of quarterback depth is something they got to keep an eye on. Um,
It's a Tannehill gun show, baby.
okay. Listen, I'm just gonna come out and say it now. This is probably the best version of Tannehill that we've really seen, especially in the last few years. Obviously, he was stuck in Miami, so I'm gonna give him a break on that one. But it still remains to be seen if he can do this again next year. Um, this is something that you gotta kind of keep your eyes out for. Anyways, uh, they were just a different team in the playoffs in the end of the season, and we're gonna talk about that in a second. But let's look first at the offense. 12th in yards per game, 21st in rushing yards, in passing yards per game. Excuse me, third in rushing yards, which I don't think really should surprise anyone, especially with the second half of the season that Derrick Henry had. And they were also 20th in points per game. As Matt alluded to, Derrick Henry was a one-man wrecking crew, especially in the back half of the season in the playoffs. Just to kind of give you some perspective of how much better he played down the stretch. He only broke 100 yards on the ground once in the first 9 weeks, and it was week 4 when he had exactly 100 yards. I want to say it was against the Atlanta Falcons, but don't quote me on that. Then in week 10, he broke out for 188 yards versus Kansas City, then went into a bye week. Weeks 12 and 13, he put up 150 yards in each game, one against Jacksonville in week 12 and Indianapolis in week 13. Week 14, he put up 100 yards. 15 was 86 yards against Houston. Didn't play week 16 against New Orleans, and then put up 211 yards to close out the season against Houston. So it is definitely a case where they found that whether it was something that they changed in the system or he just caught fire. I don't know exactly what exactly it was, but he was a completely different man, completely different player down the stretch of the season for sure. Um, Now that was just in the regular season. I'm pretty sure everyone knows what he did in the playoffs. He put up more than 180 yards in both of their first 2 playoff games. 182 versus New England, which was the 6th rated defense against the run, and then 195 against Baltimore, which is the fifth best team against the run. So he did this to teams that were notable for limiting teams' rushing production. They were not able to get things moving on the ground. It just didn't really seem like that was something that teams had been able to be productive with over the course of the season against these 2 teams. And yet he put up astronomical numbers in their first 2 in the 2 playoff games. Now he did only have 69 yards against Kansas City. Um, but I'm gonna say it was still a hell of a story to open up the playoffs. And kind of, I mean, this was the first time that Tennessee has really made a run in recent memory. Um, but like realistically speaking, I don't necessarily know that they were beating Kansas City anyway. They were on a different kind of mission this year behind Pat Mahomes. So um, I'm not gonna say I'm not gonna put that one on Derrick Henry's shoulders. It's also entirely possible that they just felt like they were gonna need to kind of uh, move the ball a little bit faster against that Kansas City offense that is just notable for putting up points in bunches. But anyways, let's not get too much into that. Moving on to the defense. 21st in yards allowed per game, 24th in passing yards allowed per game, 12th in rushing yards, and 12th in points allowed. But I would say this team definitely stepped up where it mattered. Week 17 against Houston, they held them to 14 points. Wild card round against New England, they held them to 13 points. And then in the divisional round, they held Baltimore to 12 points. So the closeout game to secure their spot in the playoffs. And then the first two rounds of the playoffs, they held those teams to combined less than 40 points in 3 games. That's saying something. And those are not necessarily slouches either. We all know that Baltimore was one of the best offensive teams in the league last season, if not the best, with Lamar Jackson. And then Houston with Deshaun Watson, and they still had DeAndre Hopkins. That team had a solid offense. They were kind of getting into shootouts. Um, and then New England, I mean, that offense wasn't necessarily like stellar all season, but you still had Tom Brady on that roster. You still had Bill Belichick out there, so a very, very impressive showing from this defense to step up the way that they did in those in those two playoff games. And then honestly, I'm going to say, or those last 3 games, and then I would even say the game against Kansas City, they may have given up 35, but the 49ers, who were renowned as like one of the best defenses in the league, one of the best overall teams in the league, Super Bowl contenders, some people would even have picked them to win the Super Bowl early on in the season, they gave up 31 to the Chiefs. So it's kind of hard to fault the um, it's kind of hard to fault the Titans for giving up the 35 that they gave up to Kansas City. I would still say it was a very, very good showing down the stretch of the season for them, and I give them a lot of credit for performing the way that they did. Um, do you have anything you want to add on that front, Matt?
No, I mean, listen, Kansas City's offense was absolutely insane, and their numbers would have been better had Pat Mahomes been playing the whole season, and so everyone knew what they could do. And for a defense that you definitely overperformed the first couple of games, they still put up a hell of a fight to get to where they ended. So, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, for a team that had no expectations, and for a team that going into week 9 looked like complete trash,
I don't know about
like that,
complete
well, not
trash.
complete trash, but didn't look good.
They did not look to the level that they looked at the end of the season. Let's just say that.
Not even remotely close.
Yeah, no, it's two completely different teams. I mean, let's face it. When they went in the wild card round, when they went to go play New England, it was a foregone conclusion that it was going to be New England versus Baltimore in the divisional round, and that was the matchup everybody was talking about. That was the matchup everybody cared about. There
Oh,
was
absolutely,
no,
and I was so
yeah.
fucking happy because all these fucking Patriots fans on my campus are like, I don't even know if I should even bother watching today. It's gonna be an easy dub for Brady, and then to watch, the game unfold, and it's like it's okay, it's fine. They're just playing with their food. And they were playing with their food for a full 4 quarters, and then remembered, oh wait, we actually need to eat our food, and they never did.
I
So
mean, do, do,
that was a really overblown statement of hate for the New England Patriots.
it is what it is. But I am gonna say this team was overlooked. I would say New England overlooked them. I would say Baltimore overlooked them somehow. I would say the only team that didn't overlook them was the Chiefs. And it kind of just showed in the way they attacked him. I would honestly say it was the one time that I can specifically remember a Bill Belichick team that looked unprepared for what they were facing. Um, they did not look like they had a game plan to stop Derrick Henry, hence his 182 yards or something crazy that he put up. So I give them a lot of credit for putting up the fight that they did. Anyways, moving on. The one notable signing that I really saw was they signed Vic Beasley to start a weak side linebacker. Um, this team I didn't necessarily see make a lot of signings in the offseason, which is a little concerning for me. I think they did have a solid core, and they were still relatively young, and they kept quite a few of the pieces together as well. Um, but they did lose some guys, like they lost Delaney Walker at tight end, for example, that I don't necessarily see replacements forward that they brought in, unless they feel like they have guys ready on the roster. So I don't really know. But for the most part, they kept a large part of the team together, and we're gonna get into the draft now, and you'll see that they made a few impactful choices for them this season. But the Vic Beasley was the only huge notable signing that I saw. It's very possible that I missed one, so if I did, I'm sure I will hear about it in the comments. But that was the only real notable signing that I saw. Anyways, into the draft now, since that was the purpose of this video. We got off on a little bit of a tangent because of just how insane the end of their season was, and it caught my eye. Let's start off with the first round pick. At the end of the first round, they went with Isaiah Wilson, offensive tackle out of Georgia. He was quoted as being described as a, quote, massive right tackle. He's got great length and is tough to beat around the corner. He shows above average mirror and pass protection, and he has the potential to become an overpowering run blocker. I would say that these are all positive things for a team that's a run first, definitely showed to be a run first offense down the stretch of last season. You're going to want a guy that can be a, quote, overpowering run blocker. So a good find for them here. The fact that he shows upside for pass protection as well gives just a lot of promise of who he could be as he matures into an NFL ready player. He needs to work on his footwork and his hand placement a bit, and he still has room to grow, but he has a very high ceiling, and he's slated to start at right tackle to start the season. Next up, we got Christian Fulton, cornerback out of LSU. He's got average size, but below average length, but he's got good top end speed. He excels in press coverage, but he's not necessarily a playmaker. It was notable that he only had 2 picks in his past 2 seasons, but he's deflected 25 passes over that same span. So he may not necessarily be bringing in a ton of picks or making plays in that sense, but he's still a very solid corner. He still defends a lot of passes, and especially in press coverage, as was noted before, definitely has the potential to make some plays on the football. He's currently listed as a cornerback 3 behind Malcolm Butler and Adoree Jackson, with veteran Jonathan Joseph also there for depth. I would say I would still expect him to see the field a fair amount this season. I think that in most nickel sets he'll be the man on the field, and I think that I do believe he would be next man up in the event of an injury to Butler or Jackson. So a good pickup for them there, kind of buff up that secondary a little bit. The defense, like all in all, did struggle a bit against the pass last season, so kind of getting another guy to buff up that secondary definitely won't hurt. Next up, we got Darrington Evans, running back out of Appalachian State. He was slightly undersized, but he has great explosiveness and top-end speed. He shows burst to get through the hole, and he's an instinctive runner once he can get into space. And he also has shown the ability to make guys miss. He has experience as a receiver and as a threat after the catch. He's currently listed as a running back too. I would expect him to play a role similar to what Dion Lewis played last season, who they did lose this offseason. I would expect him to play a role similar to that. He's going to be in to give the horse Derrick Henry a break, and he's gonna, he'll be there, catch some screens out of the backfield, get the ball in his hands, allow him to make some plays in space. He'll get a few handoffs, but the primary back and the lead back will be Derrick Henry, which I don't think surprises anyone, especially with how he finished the season last year. But this is a solid pickup for them. It gives them a playmaker out of the backfield, somebody that can kind of change pace from Derrick Henry. He's definitely not the same type of runner, and somebody that I think will perform well for them, given the opportunity to get the ball in his hands. Next up, we've got Laro Murchison. I'm sorry, I can't really read today. Defensive tackle out of NC State. He tracks the ball well and can get off blocks to make the play as a run defender. He does give ground at times, as well as occasionally struggle to finish the play, but he's got active hands and closes well when rushing the passer. He's a little on the lighter side for nose tackle. And he's also got shorter arms to be a defensive end in the 3-4 system like the Titans have. He is a third string defensive end right now, but with limited depth at nose tackle, as noted by their projected depth charts for the season, they actually only have one guy listed at nose tackle. So I would expect for him to attempt to put on some weight and kind of fill in some depth at nose tackle, and maybe step in there for a few snaps just to see what he's got. And also in the event of an injury, I think that he'll at least be a guy that they kind of look at and see is he a viable option for us for him to step in here. Next up, now we're into the 7th round. So they didn't really have a ton of kind of mid-round picks. They had picks in 1, 2, and 3, and then a 5th round pick. They did not pick in the rounds 4 or 6. Next up was Cole Mcdonald, quarterback out of Hawaii. He's got good height. He does have a little bit of a longer delivery, but that will obviously be something that they'll be able to work on given time. And he's also got good arm strength, which is kind of something that you can't teach. So the fact that he does have a longer release is maybe a little bit concerning, especially in a league where those quick releases like Pat Mahomes has and guys like that is so huge for them. Also, the fact that Pat Mahomes is flexible release, but he's a completely different animal altogether. Let's not talk about him. Anyways, he's got a good arm strength, which just gives promise to what he could be. You can't really teach arm strength like that. He's got excellent time speed, and he also has a solid pocket presence. He's technically QB3 behind Tannehill and Woodside, but I definitely think he has the potential to move up to backup if he shows well. And I noted earlier, we don't really know if this is repeatable for Tannehill. It is not something that he's necessarily done before, the kind of season that he put together towards the second half of that season last year. So I think it'll be kind of notable to see if Tannehill does struggle. I mean, he does sign a multi-year deal to come back, and I don't think that they're necessarily going to move on from him. I think that he definitely earned some leeway at that position, and kind of give him some time to work his funks out. But I'll be interested to see kind of what they choose to do with McDonald. If it's somebody that they've brought in to kind of be a long-term backup, or if they're going to try. Now, obviously, he was in the 7th round for a reason, right? So it's kind of hard to predict that he's going to step in and necessarily be anything super huge in the immediate future for this team. But I do think that the potential is there for him, and I also, like I mentioned, I don't know that Tannehill is necessarily a 10-year option for this team. I don't know that in 10 years we'll still be talking about Ryan Tannehill being the quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. So Cole McDonald should definitely have time to develop, as well as any other quarterback prospects that they bring in will definitely have time to develop, because Tannehill is definitely serviceable. But I'm interested to see kind of long-term what the quarterback position could look like for this team. And then their final pick, Chris Jackson, safety out of Marshall. He's got below average size, by average length, and excellent top end speed. He shows flashes of the ability to make plays in coverage, but he is only listed as a 3rd string strong safety. We are kind of getting down here. We are now getting down here towards the bottom of the 7th round, so not super surprising to find guys kind of deeper in the depth charts. I would say there was kind of limited that I could find about him. Now, granted, I didn't try very hard either, but I didn't see a whole lot on there about him in terms of the pre-draft analysis or anything like that. So it's kind of hard to know what this guy could potentially turn into. I would say for right now, I'm not going to grade anybody too harshly on what's usually just raw potential when you get down into the 7th round. No, usually when you get down this low, nobody's necessarily ready to make that step this season. But all that being said, I think that is it in terms of what I wanted to cover for their draft. Moving on into their draft grades. This is kind of a weird one to do, I would say. They didn't necessarily make that huge splash early in the draft for in terms of getting a skill position player that you could turn around and he's just going to be that guy for them this season. But I do think that they made impactful picks all along their draft. I think I'm going to go ahead and slot them in at around a B+. Do you have an opinion on that, Matt?
No, I think that's fair. I think they made overall decent picks, but just in general for what they needed, they got some depth, and I don't think that they did anything really to reinvent the wheel. But I think they got good value everywhere they went. good value, not insane value. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Um, I think that their first three picks definitely hit holes that they needed to cover. Um, just depth of the corner position, as well as getting themselves a new offensive tackle in the first 2 rounds, and then getting that kind of Dion Lewis second option out of that backfield guy in Darrington Evans in the third round. I think those three picks all make sense. And then obviously once you get into the fifth and then the fifth round pick and then two picks in the seventh round, it's gonna be a holding pattern on those guys. You're gonna have to wait and see what they develop into. I think that all three of those guys have potential, obviously. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been, drafted at all. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how those guys kind of progress. Uh, but I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to cover about this team. This team is in a weird spot because on the one hand, in the playoffs, they look like they were ready to compete, but the rest of the season kind of tells a different story. So even trying to grade how this team would shape up in the draft or where they would be looking in the draft, it was kind of hard for me because I can't tell if the team is ready to compete with the pieces that they have or not. They showed like I said, they showed tons and tons of progress um, in the playoffs in the end of the season, but I don't know that the team is ready to compete right now. I don't know. It kind of remains to be seen if all of this was kind of repeatable or just a one season kind of magical run. Uh, but I think that will wrap us up for today. Make sure to come back tomorrow to watch Matt go over the Philadelphia Phillies as well as I go through the Washington Redskins. Um, you have anything to say about the Philadelphia Phillies?
Um, I'm sad.
Okay, fair enough.
Not
Um,
because the Phillies are bad, but because Joe Girardi is the manager and Didi Gregorius is playing for the Phillies, and I don't like that.
valid, valid.
Joe Girardi got not that Aaron Boone's a bad coach. I like Aaron Boone, but Girardi got a raw deal at the end, and I don't think he saw himself coaching the team managing the team that would keep beating the World Series. And then Didi Gregorius is just my favorite baseball player, and he's playing on the Phillies, not the Yankees anymore. So.
Fair enough. Um, anyways, like I said in the beginning, we do not own the right to any of the clips that I was showing. So anything that was not found on the ESPN draft page will be linked in the description down below. So be sure to check that out. Also in the description, we've got our Twitter and Instagram linked. We're not necessarily active on those, but if you check out our Discord and come over and say hi, definitely be sure to respond to you guys, and we'll talk sports, esports, whatever you guys want to talk about. Um, so make sure to check that out. Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Peace.